We owe it to ourselves, and we owe it to the people we care about to become that greatest version of ourselves. People are counting on you. People you don't even know are looking up to you. They're watching you. Your kids are watching you. They want to see you lead them. But it starts with leading yourself first. If I can do it, if I can go from the depths of hell to where I'm at today, I promise you, you can too. Welcome to Street Leadership, where grit meets grace and ambition meets action. I'm your host, Ryan Goldman, diving deep into the stories that shape today's leaders. Get ready to be inspired, challenged, and transformed. Let's lead the way together. Welcome to the first episode of the Street Leadership Podcast, hosted by myself, Ryan Goldman. This podcast was started with the purpose and the hope to inspire you, wherever you're at, to step up and be the leader that you were called to be. A lot of times we have misconceptions about what leaders are or who they are. And when we think of leaders, we think of these high-powered CEOs or top-level executives. And the reality is all of us are leaders in our own right, whether it's in our families, whether it's in our businesses, the places we work, the people we interact with. We all have the ability to step up, be a leader. And a lot of times what we do is we let our experiences, sometimes our negative experiences hold us back from really stepping into our calling, because we feel like, oh, we're not like that person. We're not that high-level CEO. We're not making millions of dollars a year. And so who am I to call myself a leader and start acting or behaving in that way? And it takes you stepping into your calling in yourself to realize what you're truly capable of. All of us were put here with a bigger purpose, and so my hope is that through this podcast, you hear a story or you connect and realize if we can do it, you can too. So everybody loves the comeback story. Everybody loves hearing about the person who came from rags to riches, and not the stories about the people that were kind of grew up with the silver spoon in their mouth and just kind of had everything given to them. But we want to hear about the people that went through adversity and struggle and heartbreak. They went through hell and back. And those are the ones that truly inspire us and help us realize, like, man, if that person can do it, what can I do? Okay, I thought I was going through a hard time. Man, this person went through 10 times worse, and look at where they're at. So I want to kind of talk to you guys just a little bit about my own personal story and who I am and where I come from. And hopefully some of you guys can connect with it. Some of you might not be able to, and that's okay. But just want to tell you kind of who I am and where I come from. And currently right now, I'm the vice president of sales for Clay Solutions. I got started in the door-to-door industry 11 years ago. So I started out knocking on doors and kind of worked my way through the ranks to get to the position I'm at now, which is vice president of sales. And I've been doing it for 11 years. And my background is kind of a colorful one, right? I wasn't ever a leader. I wasn't ever like this exceptional person. I was never like the most popular person or anything like that. I went to school at Western Illinois University, and I was going to school for law enforcement. And at the time, while I was going to school for law enforcement, I got into selling drugs, mainly marijuana. And back then it was kind of like, it was a little bit more serious than it is now. It seems like, you go to the store now and go buy some weed, and that's not how it used to be. So back then I was selling weed, and that was kind of my first experience in sales. And I realized that, there was a very high demand and not a lot of supply. And so I was able to make a lot of money in college and be able to kind of support myself while I was going to school. However, it's kind of an oxymoron because I'm going to school for law enforcement, and here I am selling pot, and so that didn't last for very long. I ended up having my house get raided while I was going to college. I remember walking outside of class. I had actually gotten kicked out of Western Illinois, so I was going to the community college my second year, and I walked out of Spoon River, and I saw like 12 squad cars in front of my house, and I turned around and I ran the other way, and I was actually able to get away, and I was like this outlaw on the run for a couple of days, and eventually turned myself in and kind of faced the music on that one. And it was kind of just a challenging time in my life. And at that same exact time, my dad had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. And so, I'm trying to sell drugs, or weed to be able to pay for myself to go to school. Also trying to like support myself financially because my dad had been really sick. And I came home for one winter's break, and my mom came downstairs. She was talking to me like, "Hey, your dad's acting really weird." And so I go up and talk to him, and we have kind of this really weird conversation. And he ends up falling out of the couch. We call an ambulance for him. He gets rushed to the hospital, and that's when we find out he has a brain tumor. And so while he's going through that, he basically was put into a coma, and that was probably one of the most challenging times of my life is that experience with my father, and to see the person that you really look up to, who is like the leader of your family, the leader of our household, like basically helpless and not able to do anything. I mean, he's in a coma. He did eventually come out of a coma. They did surgery, and it was successful, and it looked like things were going to be going really, really well. However, he had some tubes in the back of his head, and they went to pull those out, and they nicked something, and it caused bleeding and hemorrhaging in his brain, and he never recovered after that, and he eventually passed away not that long after that. And so that was in December of 2010 when he passed away. And at that same time in January is when I got sentenced to go do my jail time for selling weed, for having my house get raided. And luckily I didn't have to do a lot of time. It wasn't anything very severe, but it was definitely enough to be a wake-up call. And I remember getting out of jail and being picked up to finding out that one of my good friends had just overdosed and died. And it was a hard thing. My dad had just died, just got kicked out of school, house had just gotten raided, friend had just died, and I was just at like a very broken place in my life. And trying to get out of jail and pick up the piece of my life, I was working at a movie theater, Century Theaters in Deer Park, and I was scooping popcorn, and I was really good at upselling. You get the large, 50 cents more, and I remember at that point in time, I was applying to try to be an assistant manager at the movie theater, and they told me that I couldn't even be promoted to be an assistant manager at the movie theater because of my background. And I had applied to some other jobs, same thing. I actually applied for a door-to-door company and was rejected from there because of my background, doing the exact same thing that I'm doing now. And luckily, one of my friend's dads, he was the director of building and grounds for a school district, and he knew me. He knew I was in just going through a rough time, but knew I was a good kid and had a good heart. And so he actually gave me an opportunity to come in and work with him doing grounds work. So I was mowing lawns, I was pulling weeds, cutting down trees, waking up. I had to be there at 6 a.m., done by 3, and just doing manual labor. And as the season was ending, I started applying to be a custodian, right? And I had negotiated with myself. I was like, man, I can commit myself to this. I could eventually become a head custodian. I'll work my way up. I'll have the summers off, and like life will be good. And that was honestly what I thought my future was going to be, and I was okay with that, and who knows what would happen. However, this girl that I had worked with at the previous job, but that didn't hire me doing the door-to-door sales. I had worked there for a couple of days before they found out my background check didn't pass. She reached out to me and she asked me, hey, would I be willing to come back with this other company she had started with? It was called Just Energy. And, I could make $1,000 a week. And I'm 22 years old at the time, busting my ass in the middle of the heat, for, I think it was $14 an hour or something, which at that stage of my life was really, really good. But it wasn't necessarily, what I was like, man, if I can make $1,000 a week, like that sounds awesome. So I came in for a job interview and an orientation, and they ended up giving me an opportunity. And I committed myself. I realized that I didn't have a lot of opportunity, like other people. A lot of people maybe feel like, man, if I don't like this job, I could just go somewhere else. For me, I was like, man, I don't have any options. So, if I can make $1,000 a week or $2,000 a week, like I am all in. And that's exactly what I did. Is I committed myself to door-to-door sales. I was willing to do whatever it takes to figure it out. And they painted these crazy numbers. You make $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a week. And I remember my first paycheck was for $200, significantly less than I was making doing the grounds work, for $14 an hour. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, man, what am I doing? Like I just gave up the safe, secure, job for kind of like all this unknown, and I don't know what can happen, whether, like crossing my fingers, it'll work out, but who really knows? And I'll never forget, it was kind of like an epiphany moment for me as I went out to eat with my girlfriend at the time. And, I was kind of venting to her, I'm like, man, I've been working 10 hours a day in the heat, knocking on doors, and, I only got paid $200, and she's like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? It doesn't make any sense. Like you should definitely go back to what you were doing before, because you're making more money and you know what you're going to make. And I realized in that moment, everything came down to me. Okay. If I wasn't getting the results, it was because of me. And so I really I took ownership at that stage of my life that I was in the situation that I was in because of me, because of the decisions I made. And if I wanted to change it, I needed to lead myself, right? I needed to step up, and I needed to get my shit together and go all in. And that's exactly what I did. And I'll never forget, my second week paycheck was $1,900. My third week, I think, was over 3,000. And I was like, man, I'm in this for life. Like there's nothing sweeter than this. And my first year in the business, I ended up making $80,000. Second year in the business, 24 years old, I ended up crossing $111,000 in income, and to be 24 years old with, a felony on my background, kicked out of college, I felt pretty proud of myself. I was doing better than a lot of the people that I knew, given the circumstances, and things were going good, man. And I realized at this point, like I needed to develop myself, and I started using books as mentors and audiobooks. I really committed myself to the self-development process, and if I could give anybody advice, commit to developing yourself. If you can commit to developing yourself, become the greatest version of you, everything else in your life will follow suit, and so that's what I did. Is I turned my car into Success University. I was listening to audio programs by Tony Robbins. John Maxwell was one of my biggest mentors, and learning about leadership. And I really committed to trying to become the greatest version of myself, and in business. Like I became a student of the business, a student of success, right? They say you want to be a doctor, you got to go to school, you got to study medicine, right? You want to be a lawyer, you got to go to law school, you got to study the law. I was told, if you want to be successful, study success. And so that's what I did. I started studying successful people on attitude, leadership, finances, business, all these things that would add value to my life. Somebody told me that every success book you read is like putting $100,000 in your bank account. If I was going to pay you $100,000 to read a book, would you read it? Probably, and so that's kind of how I treated it. It was like, man, everything that I'm pouring into my mind is going to pay me a dividend. And sure enough, it did. So I started to experience a lot of success, right? 24 years old, I was earning $100,000 a year. And it continued to kind of rise. In 2015, I had my first son, Ian, which was a huge blessing. And then shortly followed by the year later, I had my second son, Dominic. And in 2016, I think is when I crossed $225,000 in income. And, once again, I'm 26 years old, making, nearly $250,000. I have like this amazing lifestyle. I'm out of the field at this point. We have a couple more offices. I think we opened up 2 more offices at that point. And so I really felt like I had made it. 26 years old, $250,000, not having to really spend all my time in the field. I'm able to kind of spend time doing what I want to do. But the challenge was my idea of success was like a Wolf of Wall Street mentality. It's like, if you have all this money and all this freedom and all this success, like, what should you do? You should go out and party, and so that's kind of that was what I started to do with my life at that point. And really what I started to do was to self-sabotage. And I don't know if you guys have heard the story of like the thermostat, right? And basically what it says is like, when things start heating up in our life, right? And things start going really, really, really well, kind of like a thermostat in the room. If it's set at 65 degrees and it gets to 70, what happens? The air conditioning kicks on and it cools everything down. And essentially that's what happened. Is I started experiencing this level of success that I just wasn't ready for. I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have a plan for the money. I didn't have, I hadn't gone through a lot of the pain that I was yet to kind of approach. And so I just started to self-sabotage. And what I did is I really turned to partying, and I turned to drugs and alcohol, mainly cocaine and alcohol. And I allowed that to gain a huge influence in my life. And basically what that led to, it led to me, getting a separation from the mother of my kids. It led to me getting a DUI. It led to me getting arrested 12 hours later after the DUI. It led to, orders of protection getting placed against me. And it led to me eventually losing my kids. And so I ended up in just a really, really broken place. Here I was on one level of like, oh man, I'm earning $250,000. I'm young. I'm living the dream, and then to have like everything just kind of like swept out from under my feet due to my own doing, and end up like in this broken place of like, man, I almost have nothing. And it was a kind of a humbling experience, to say the least. But unfortunately, I didn't do anything to change it. And so even though all of that stuff had happened, what I did was I perpetuated that cycle even worse. And so kind of a couple weird situations that happened, but basically my ex had custody of our kids. Something happened with her. The kids got placed into foster care. And so I'm in the situation where I have to decide like, hey, am I gonna fight this battle to try and get them out? And I did, right? But I hadn't changed internally. So I'm like trying to put out this facade that I've changed and that I'm not still, drinking and doing drugs, even though I was. And so I was not making any progress towards getting my kids out of the situation that they were in. And it got to a point where I was ready to sign guardianship of my kids away because the battle had gotten so hard and so difficult. And I had gone through so much pain, for like almost the last year, and tried jumping through these hoops. And it just like, there was just no progress being made towards it. And it was the day before I was about to sign guardianship of my kids away. And I'm laying in bed and I can't sleep. And I'll never forget, I had a spiritual experience, and it was almost as if God was speaking to me. And it was, it was one sentence, right? And it was, everything in your life will change if you just change. Everything in your life will change if you just change. And I realized everything in my life needed to change, and it really started with, I needed to start leading myself. I needed to step up and become the man that I was supposed to be, the man that I knew I could become. And so it started with getting sober. That very next day, I decided, you know what, man, I need to get myself into AA. And so I'll never forget this. I didn't have a car at the time, actually, because I'd gotten the DUI, and so I was kind of in a challenging situation at this point. And I remember taking an Uber to an AA meeting, and I get there, and nobody shows up. And I'm like, man, this is crazy. And then I'm like, I go to the thing, maybe God doesn't want me to get sober. It's nobody's here. So but I was like, you know what, let me try another one, right? So sure enough, like the next hour or something, there was supposed to be another meeting, so I Ubered to that one, and same thing, nobody showed up. I'm like, wow, this is you know God's testing me here. Do I really want to change, or is it should I just go back and revert back to kind of the old ways? And sure enough, I ended up going to a third one, and people were there, and that kind of started my journey of sobriety, which was almost 4 years ago. And so I started going to 3 meetings a day. I started going 6 a.m. meeting, a noon meeting, and then a evening meeting, because I realized I was like, the only way for me to get to where I need to be is I need a solid foundation, right? And the only way to do that is to be clear, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, if I want to have any hope of getting my kids back and getting myself together. So man, I went all in on this fight for my kids. I started doing substance abuse counseling, domestic violence counseling, mental health counseling, going to AA, jumping through every single hoop that was possibly imaginable, while also trying to like rebuild my business, rebuild the relationships with the people around me. And as soon as like things are starting to heat up, right? This was in September of 2019, and then March 2020 happens, and boom, COVID. Everything shuts down. They shut down the court system, right? They shut down my visitation with my kids. They shut down our business, and just goes like everything that I had made progress towards just disappears. Luckily, a couple months prior, I had met my beautiful fiance, and she had, luckily was there, and just my rock through that entire situation. If she hadn't been there, I don't know what would have happened. It could be a totally different story, but luckily she was there, even through COVID and everything else. So she was there when I was at like the lowest of my lows, right? Like, I mean, here I am, my kids gone, battling this, drug and alcohol addiction, business shut down, so I'm literally like on unemployment, and just trying to like, pick up the pieces of my life. And one of the things with COVID was I remember committing myself and saying, you know what, no matter what, I'm gonna come out of this better than I went into it. Whatever I have to do to become better as a result of this, I'm willing to do. And so I started focusing on my health, right? I started focusing on my fitness. I started going to the gym consistently. I started working out. I started reading again. There kind of been a lapse. I chose partying over reading and the self-development, so taking a break from that. So to get back into that, I started attending seminars. I attended every Tony Robbins seminar there is, to really get this momentum going in my life. And I remember that, like the court dates, they just kept getting pushed out and pushed out and pushed out, and just trying to have faith that everything in my life will get better if I just get better, right? And trying to keep that in my mind, that despite the outcome, despite what's going on around me, if I just stay committed to the path of leading myself, getting myself to do the right things, everything else will eventually fall into place. And so eventually we finally get our court date at the end of 2020 in December, and I was able to win full custody of my kids. And that was one of the biggest victories of my life, one of the biggest blessings of my life. And you don't really hear about dads winning full custody very often, and so I'm living proof that it can be done if you're willing to fight for it. And it was the hardest battle that I've ever had to fight in my life. I had to overcome every single one of my demons, every single thing that I had to face in my life. I had to figure out a way through it to become better as a result of it, and to be able to become victorious on the other end. And so in June of 2021, that's when COVID kind of ended for our business, and business reopened up. And so we're basically starting from scratch again, right? In June of 2021, we're getting ready to start over, okay, and rebuild. But this time I was doing it sober. I was doing it from a clear mind. I was doing it with a different perspective, just like a different level of intensity than I had ever had previous in my life. So I was willing to do whatever it took. And at this point in time, I realized that my outer world was starting to reflect my inner world. I had gotten rid of the demons. I'd gotten rid of a lot of the things that had been holding me back. I quit smoking cigarettes, quit drinking Mountain Dew, quit eating hot Cheetos, all the stupid things, man, that were little things that were just holding me back from being that greatest version of myself. And my best year previous had been 226,000. In our first year back out of COVID, I crossed over $1 million in income. Once again, I would say with 100% certainty, the reason that happened was because everything was aligned internally to where it started to present itself externally. At that point, we had almost 50 people in our organization, and I realized just the importance of having to lead myself first. The hardest person you're ever going to have to lead is the one in the mirror. Leading other people is easy if you can lead through your own example. It's not what you say, it's what you do. It's who you are. When you can get that in alignment, it makes leading other people so much easier. But a lot of times, we have this mentality of like, oh man, I'm just going to kind of tell people like this is what they should do, but then I'm doing something different that's out of alignment with that. And people, nobody's ever going to follow a flake. So we have to realize that it comes down to us and the decisions that we make, and stepping up and leading ourselves if we truly want to be able to make an impact on other people. They say that people don't have business problems, right? They have personal problems that bleed into business. So if you're not excelling where you want to business-wise, like, you got to look at yourself, okay, where are you out of alignment in your life, and what can you do to get yourself back on track? Your past doesn't determine your future. It doesn't matter what struggles or adversity that you're going through right now. You will, and you can come out of it on the other side better. And that's the hardest thing, is to have that faith that even when life might be crumbling down around you, okay, or maybe you feel like you're doing the right things, but you're not seeing the progress, it's just having the faith to keep taking that next step, and keep taking that next step. If success was easy, everybody would have it. And if it was easy to be a leader, everybody would be a leader. Okay, but it's not easy. It takes discipline, it takes hard work, it takes pain, it takes sacrifice. They say that diamonds are made from pressure, right? And if you want to shine like a diamond, you got to be willing to get cut like a diamond. Be able to withstand the pressure that you're going to have to go through to be able to come out on the other side of that. In the past 7 months have been amazing. We've opened up 2 more offices. We're set to eclipse last year, already this year. And it all starts with being able to lead ourselves first. We all have challenges. We all have adversity that's going to come into our life. We're all going to face obstacles. We're all going to face personal challenges, business challenges, relationship challenges, but it's your ability to keep moving forward in spite of that. To keep doing the right thing, even when nobody's watching. To keep doing the right thing, whether you're making the progress that you feel like you should be making or not, but just have the faith that just by doing it, eventually it's going to bring you to where you want to be. We owe it to ourselves. And we owe it to the people we care about to become that greatest version of ourselves. People are counting on you. People you don't even know are looking up to you. They're watching you. Your kids are watching you. They want to see you lead them. But it starts with leading yourself first. If I can do it, if I can go from the depths of hell to where I'm at today, I promise you, you can too. Just got to lead yourself well. I believe in you, and we'll see you on the next episode.